Sergey Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, thank you very much for being with RT today.
My pleasure.
Now, you're ending your year with a visit to India. Russia has been clear in its support for India's aspirations to become a permanent member of UN Security Council. How do you think the much criticized UN Security Council will benefit from India's participation?
First of all, I would say that criticism is not always warranted. The latest wave of criticism was related to the fact that the Security Council allegedly cannot act on Syria. By the desire to see some action on the part of the Security Council, the critics wanted to pass a resolution under Chapter 7, which provides for the use of sanctions and the use of force eventually. And Russia and China are convinced 100% that this would be a disaster, and that this would be the beginning of a very slippery slope and will bring us to the Libyan scenario, which we cannot afford anymore, and the region cannot afford. The Security Council was once expanded only in the category of non-permanent members, and now, after several decades of the Council functioning in the unchanged composition, there is a very strong movement towards expanding its membership to better reflect the pluralism of the world community. We are strongly in favor of this. We are convinced that the developing countries and first of all, the new economic and financial leaders in the third world, countries like India, Brazil, for example, that they must be represented in the Security Council, and we would be in favor of making them new permanent members, provided, of course, a decision is taken to create new permanent seats, because this is the biggest split in the United Nations. Russia is convinced that this type of division cannot be resolved by an arithmetic vote, that there must be consensus searching. It would be very unfortunate if the reform of the Security Council is voted through, because this would split the membership, and those who would vote against an imposed reform, in their eyes, the expanded Security Council would lose legitimacy, not gain legitimacy. And more legitimacy is what we all want. And that's why the Council should be more representative. But in any case, while we are working very thoroughly to reach this general agreement on a reform, we believe that India certainly deserves to be permanent member of the Security Council.
Like you said, Russia is permanently blocking attempts of some of UN Security Council members to pass a resolution that would allow a foreign intervention into Syria. But do you think a military action could still take place going around the UN, like it happened in case of Iraq?
Well, not only in case of Iraq, but also in case of the former Yugoslavia. Yes, it is possible, and you just cited one example. There are some others. But I also feel that those who would like to interfere in the Syrian crisis, they don't want to do this without some kind of legitimacy, or at least without some kind of an action in the United Nations, which could be used to justify this as being legitimate. Some people would like very much to internationalize this situation and to expand violence beyond the Syrian borders. Attempts are being made, especially in cases when the refugees have to flee Syria because of the disproportionate actions by the government forces. But on the other side, the opposition, the armed groups of the opposition, which are several, which are not united under single command, they also resort to unacceptable methods, absolutely contrary to international humanitarian law, taking hostages, staging terrorist attacks, and it is very disheartening that our Western colleagues in the Security Council started to refuse condemning terrorist attacks in Syria, saying that yes, terrorism is bad, but you must take into account the overall context of what is going on in Syria and why people resort to terrorist attacks. It's absolutely unacceptable, and this logic might lead us, if we follow this logic, it might lead us to a very dangerous situation, not only in the Middle East, but in other parts of the world. If our partners in the West would begin to qualify terrorists as bad terrorists and acceptable terrorists.
One more reason that arises time to time that could actually okay the foreign intervention is Syria's possession of chemical weapons. Do you believe that Syria will use chemical weapons, or is this another pretext for an invasion?
I don't believe Syria would use chemical weapons. It would be a political suicide for the government if it does. Every time we hear rumors or pieces of information come to surface that the Syrians are doing something with their chemical weapons, we double check, we triple check, we go directly to the government, and we get all the time we get the very firm assurances that this is not going to be used under any circumstances. Our information is, which correlates with the information the Americans have, I understand, that the latest reports about some movement of the chemical weapons were related to the steps undertaken by the government to concentrate the chemical stuff which has been dispersed in various locations into two sites to make sure that it is absolutely protected. And it is also accepted by everyone, including our Western colleagues, the Europeans and the Americans, that the biggest threat in this situation is the probability that the rebels might take hold of chemical weapons. And therefore, while recognizing this, when our Western friends say, but still the responsibility is entirely with the Syrian government, even if the rebels take hold of it, it's a very strange logic, because at the same time those very people encourage rebels not to negotiate with the government, but to continue fighting and giving them arms, money, and moral and political support. So it's a very controversial position. In general, the logic of those who say no negotiations with Assad is really very controversial and very dangerous, because, well, we are not justifying what the government is doing. They have been making a lot of mistakes, have been using force disproportionately. The security forces clearly were and are unprepared to face the public protests and armed protests in the cities and in the villages. They have been trained, to counter foreign aggression, not to keep law and order in a civilized manner. But their position is provoking the government, as I said, resorting to terrorist attacks, taking hostages, and also introducing into this conflict the sectarian dimension, which is very dangerous. It is already reverberating in the Muslim world. Sunni, Shia, Arabs, Kurds, and the ethnic and confessional sectarian composition of Syria is so complex that if the chaos is established there, it would reverberate all over the region. But coming back to the present situation, if people who say no negotiations with Assad, if they believe that his departure in whatever form is number one priority, then they must understand that for this geopolitical goal of theirs, they would have to pay the price, but the price in the lives of the Syrians, of the Syrian civilians. Our priority number one is not somebody's head, is the cessation of violence, end of the bloodshed. And if they say that they want to save Syria and to save Syrians, then they should join us and should lean on all those who are fighting inside Syria to stop doing this and sit down to negotiate without any preconditions. And the fate of Assad must be decided by the Syrian people, not by the outsiders and by part of the Syrian opposition.
From the very beginning of this conflict, Russia has been heavily criticized in the West for blocking the attempts of the United States and its allies to get things right in Syria. Do you think that if Russia has handled it differently from the very beginning, let's say a year ago convinced Assad to step down, then things would be different in Syria?
We are not in the business of regime change. And some of the regional players were suggesting to us, why don't you tell President Assad to leave? We will arrange for some safe haven for him. My answer is very simple. If indeed those who suggested this to us have this in mind, they should take it directly to President Assad. Why shall they use us as postmen? When the crisis started in 2011, in August, a few months after the crisis started, it was Russia who suggested that the Security Council react. And there was a statement adopted by consensus which contained all the right things, that everyone must stop fighting and that the dialogue must begin. Then we supported the Arab League plan. We endorsed the Arab League observers to be sent to Syria, and again worked very thoroughly with Damascus to accept them. Unfortunately, their mission was aborted for no good reason. It was aborted exactly at the time when, in December 2011, they submitted their first report to the Security Council, which was rather on the objective side, and which was not putting all the blame on the government only, but also describing the atrocities and wrongdoings by the opposition groups. Then the Arab League aborted their mission. And then the UN observers were deployed. And as the relative calm started to be seen, not sustainable, but still some signs of stabilization were brought with the UN observers, then there was an upsurge of provocations in the areas where the UN observers were working. And the purpose was very obvious to us. The purpose was to create a situation which would be unbearable for them to continue, and that was achieved. So they left as well. And then, of course, in June this year, in June 2012, in Geneva, there was an action group initiated by Kofi Annan with our very strong support, because we, for quite some time, had been suggesting that the key outside players meet and try to see whether they can reach a common approach to creating conditions in which the Syrian parties would be negotiating their own future without outside interference. We managed to agree on this sequence. Stop fighting, appoint interlocutors, let them negotiate the composition of the transitional governing organ. This organ, while keeping the state institutions, should prepare for elections and should draft a new constitution. And we say, fine, this is consensus. Let's stick to it. Let's send this message very strongly in sync, and to all of those who are fighting. Our Western friends who just signed this document said, no, this is not enough. We have to have a Security Council Chapter 7 resolution, and we have to have some addition to this scheme saying that Assad is out. But this is not what we agreed. So our tradition is, when we negotiate something and when we agree on something, we respect the agreement. Unfortunately, those of our partners who negotiated with us in Geneva probably have different habits, and we still feel the negative effect of this. So the Geneva scheme is absolutely actual today. Brahimi, who was appointed to replace Kofi Annan, reiterated that it is the basis for his activities. We are in favor of unifying the opposition, and after the Geneva meeting we have been insisting that all of those who have influence on the opposition groups should help unify it on the platform of the Geneva communique. So we have been sending the same message to the government and to the opposition. Guys, this is the basis. Do what the Geneva communique suggests. It's in your interest. Sit down and negotiate. But the Doha meeting, which endorsed the Syrian National Coalition and which was supported by the West and important regional players, adopted also a declaration which says that the main goal of the opposition is dismantling, or rather toppling the regime and dismantling its institutions, directly opposite to what the Geneva communique said. I understand that no one is talking to the opposition regarding the need to be a bit more realistic and regarding the need to avoid positions which are basically ruining the country.
NATO's deployment of Patriot missiles on Turkish-Syrian border, is it part of solution? And who are they really targeted at?
Well, first we understand, of course, the concern of Turkey and of all other countries who are continuing to receive Syrian refugees. It's a burden under any circumstances. And of course, the situation is quite tense. The opposition in the region, in the Syrian regions bordering Turkey, is quite active, probably trying to trigger some cross-border activities and then having the international community, revolt against the border violations. Incidents happen, and the cross-border fire, which took place several times, we immediately were raising this issue with the Syrians, and we believe that what they explained to us is credible. This was not intentional. They were chasing the opposition groups who were taking them and then fleeing, and we immediately suggested to the Turks and the Syrians that we might help to create a direct communication line so that in real time they can check whenever an incident takes place. The Syrians were ready. The Turks said that they do have their own channels of communication. And then this issue of Patriots was raised. We recognize the right for Turkey to think about its own security, and the right of Turkey to use for this purpose the international arrangements which Turkey has in that particular case, NATO membership, and we accepted this as a given. On the other hand, the more military hardware you accumulate in one place, the more risk you have that this hardware one day would be used. As for the purpose of this deployment, yes, I read and hear that some experts believe that if it is intended to prevent any Syrian crossfire, then it could be positioned a bit differently. And as it is envisaged to be positioned, some people say it is quite useful to protect the radar, the American radar, which is part of the American missile defense system. They are building, quoting the threat from Iran. If this is the case, then it is even more risky, I would say, because this multiple purpose deployment could create additional temptations.
So it's more about Iran rather than Syria, right?
Well, that's what some people say, and the configuration as it is being presented in the media really looks like it could be used against Iran.
You know, Syria is not the only issue between America and Russia. First thing Obama did when he got reelected is that he signed the so-called Magnitsky Law that would sanction Russian citizens and some Russian officials. What does it tell you about the new stage of the Russia-US relations with Putin, Obama at the helm?
Well, I don't think this was the first thing Obama did when he was reelected. This was inevitable when the senators, Senator Cardin and some others, introduced this idea. It was clearly done to create catch-22 for the administration, because the administration was moving the removal of Jackson-Vanik amendment with the support of quite a number of people on the Hill, and this was absolutely obvious that the Americans wanted, because with Russia accession to WTO, keeping Jackson-Vanik would mean depriving the American companies of the benefits of WTO membership of the Russian Federation. So they had to do this anyway. And then the Republicans, I think, decided to have this trick and to hinge the Jackson-Vanik removal on Magnitsky Act, which was at that moment, I think, mostly done against President Obama. Because as for the Russian citizens who have been included on that list, and I haven't seen it, it's still not published, if they wanted to prevent the Russian citizens they don't like to enter the United States, they can do it without any law and without any show. If they wanted to freeze the assets of anyone, they can do this just going to the court and presenting evidence. Again, without any show, without any public relations campaigns. But they believed that one of the achievements, probably as the administration presented its activities for the last 4 years, one of the achievements was the reset with the Russian Federation. And they want to hit Obama exactly in this reset thing. It's unfortunate because it makes domestic politicking, dominating the international agenda and dominating in the minds of many almost everything which is happening between Russia and the United States, and which is much, much more comprehensive and complex than just the human rights in the interpretation by the American senators.
Well, we'll remember the off-record conversation that Obama and Medvedev had, and Obama promised to be more flexible right after elections. But from what you're saying, how much flexible can he really be, or allow himself to be, with this Republican opposition in Congress?
Well, I think that's the peculiarities of the American system, and any congressman can freeze consideration of very important issues just because the beef from his particular state is not being admitted to one country or another for phytosanitary reasons. And the issues of global importance could be just frozen because of the interest of one single state in the United States. And the interests having nothing to do with the substance of the issue in question. So sometimes the issues of huge importance, like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the need to settle it, are being kept hostages for years and years because of the peculiarity of the American electoral cycles. We would prefer to approach international issues on the basis of their merit and on the basis of the crying need to do something together without looking back at your domestic politicking interests.
Sergey Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you.